DestinationMarc.
Hey guys, how's it going? Marcelo here. There are plenty of characters in the Crash series that we don't get to see very often. They'll get referenced here and there, but usually after their introduction to the series, one reason or another will lead to them making minimal appearances afterward. The original character to undergo this was Crash's girlfriend, Tawna. After her debut with the rest of the cast in the very first game, she was dropped immediately and replaced by Coco, and after that we didn't get to see her again until Crash Boom Bang of all games. But now in the post-hiatus era, Tawna's made a huge comeback, and even gotten a fresh makeover for her role in Crash 4. But how did this happen? How did Tawna evolve from damsel in distress to badass hero? Why did it happen? And what does it mean for the character moving forward? Let's buckle up, dive in, and find out. This is the analysis of Tawna. The Willy Wombat era of Crash 1's development really did solidify a lot of elements that would stick around by the time the project became Crash Bandicoot. Cortex and Brio were always the villains, and Crash always had a girlfriend he had to rescue from them, but back when he was Willy, Tawna was known as Carmen. Initially designed as a female wombat with the same body type as Willy, but later revised to look a little more humanoid. In this telling of the plot, Willy was the product of overexposure to media and would wig out and change TV personalities, and Cortex's reason for creating Carmen was much different. Once Carmen became Tawna, her rework story described her going through the Evolvo Ray and awaiting brainwashing via the Cortex Vortex. In the final game, after the attempt to brainwash Crash fails and he escapes, Cortex and his minions hold Tawna hostage, preparing to do the same thing to her. Right out the gate, Tawna was always a character filled with stereotypes. She was into girly things like shopping and putting on makeup, she was a damsel in distress, and her redesign was likely inspired by the wacky scenario of the goofy protagonist having a drop-dead gorgeous bombshell of a girlfriend. She was the Jessica Rabbit to Crash's Roger. Now, despite Naughty Dog saying here in the art bible that she was meant to be more than your average damsel, her cunning side was completely done away with in the final game, leaving her as exactly that, a captive Crash had to save. This will be important later. Once Crash 2 was announced and started getting shown off, Tawna was very noticeably absent. As it turned out, throughout Crash 1's development, Naughty Dog faced many criticisms surrounding Tawna's design. Her first look was harshly lambasted by the Universal Interactive Studios marketing director, who yelled at them saying she was way too over-sexualized, and even after the design was revised, it still had some higher-ups at odds. It wasn't until Shuhei Yoshida witnessed young Japanese playtesters commenting on Tawna's look that everyone was in agreement that after the first game released, the character would be immediately dropped from the franchise.
And when we are doing playtesting in Japan, one kid said that when he saw her, who's this middle-aged woman? So she was too old for the Japanese market. So we ditched her and created this little sister character, Coco.
So that was it for Tawna. After Crash 1, she was replaced by Coco, and it'd be a while before we got to see her again, only being referenced in Crash 3 and Wrath of Cortex with this framed picture Crash kept, and later in Twin Sanity implied to work at Mulan Cortex. Now, while the US didn't see much of Tawna after the first game, Japan ironically decided to keep her around for a bit longer, giving an explanation for her disappearance in Crash 2, claiming in the manual that she left Crash for Pinstripe, which, damn, didn't realize she liked bad boys, including her in the official Crash manga, and even referencing her in a Japanese exclusive epilogue in Crash Bash, where after Uka's defeat, Crash is congratulated by who he thinks is Tawna, but is actually Coco in an aged-up body that she created in order to debut as an idol. Don't really like that. Huh, is that where Toys for Bob got the idea? Anyway, it wasn't until Dimps' infamous title Crash Boom Bang that we actually got to see Tawna again, and as a playable character for the first time ever to boot. That's about all there is to her inclusion here, though. There was no real fanfare when she was revealed. She makes another quick cameo with an updated design on a poster in Crash's house in Mind Over Mutant, and then the hiatus happened. Once the revival era of Crash kicked off, however, there was one more quick nod to Tawna, not in Skylanders Imaginators, but the Netflix show Skylanders Academy. And it was when Crash described her like this.
Last thing I remember, I was on the Wampa Islands and about to free my friend Tawna from the clutches of the evil Dr. Neo Cortex.
That we realized a shakeup was about to occur. Having been announced alongside the Skylanders inclusion, we knew the remastered trilogy was coming, meaning Tawna was about to get thrown right back into the spotlight. How are Vicarious Visions going to handle her inclusion? What happened next started off small, but grew more prominent as the series moved forward. N-Sane's announcement trailer elicited a crazy electric reaction from fans everywhere. I still remember that day during PSX 2016 like it was yesterday. Not too long after that trailer drop, however, we got our first look at the remastered opening of Crash 1, and lo and behold, Tawna made her real reintroduction to the series with a sleek updated look, and instead of being held captive by 2 lab assistants, she knocks one out and is only subdued when a bunch of them surround her. The feisty, cunning Tawna that Naughty Dog originally envisioned had finally come to fruition, and even though she still spends the majority of N-Sane's Crash 1 in Cortex's clutches, she does have a lot more personality this time around, and for anyone who thought she'd get watered down too much, she even retains a little bit of her original seductive nature. Don't get me wrong, from that Skylanders clip, she is still Crash's girlfriend in N-Sane, but their dynamic would soon get reworked. CTR Nitrofield came around 2 years later, and in the E3 2019 trailer, which marked the start of the awesome CTR TV segments, Tawna was teased to be coming to the game as a playable character again. But just like with Coco and Fake Crash, leave it to Beanox to inject even more personality into Tawna. She's done with being a damsel, and in this game she's shown to have formed the Nitro Squad, a tough-as-nails racing team comprised of herself and the trophy girls from the original CTR. Combine that with all sorts of neat skins, and this was one cool way to really have Tawna leave an impression that wasn't solely predicated on sex appeal. She's now an action girl, redefined with a new sense of confidence and independence. And once more, Toys for Bob would take this new iteration of Tawna and not just improve on it, but do something a little different with it. The first rumblings of Crash 4 came about when images of some merch leaked out, and amid the grindy glimpses of Crash and Coco, we saw a hip, swashbuckling new Bandicoot character with the name Tawna. But she looked so different from how she did before. What happened to her, and why is she sporting an all-new design? Come the release of the game, and we got the full answer. Since Crash 4 is a game about alternate dimensions, this is a Tawna from another universe, and she's got one hell of a compelling, tragic backstory. In her world, Entropy is her main adversary, and some time ago she'd actually succeeded in killing that universe's Crash and Coco. Left utterly devastated by this loss, Tawna hardened up and became a badass hero, vowing to take the villain down herself and avenge her friends. This martyr attitude is on full display in certain moments in the game, the most prominent being when she actively prevents the siblings from going after the Entropies and heads out herself. This Tawna is fully independent, and the only quip we get about our own Prime Tawna is this bit from Coco.
Oh, we lost touch in your universe too, huh?
So this is a Crash game that actually acknowledges Tawna's departure, but chooses not to elaborate on it. So the big question is, why? It's cool, of course, that Tawna's back in the series with a brand new role to play, but why is this what was chosen for her? And why isn't this what she could have been long ago? Well, again, I've personally theorized that it's because of the stereotypes. Female characters have changed a lot in media. If we're talking cartoons, then you'll definitely remember how back in the day, characters like Lois Lane and April O'Neil were like the poster girls for the term damsel in distress. But looking at some of their newer iterations now, they're more action-oriented, joining their respective heroes on their adventures. The same has now happened with Tawna. She used to be just the prize at the end of the game, a goal the protagonist had to work towards, a pretty piece of eye candy whose role was to be totally helpless and at the mercy of her captors. But now, she is her own character, a hero who is just as strong and resilient as Crash. However, this overhaul hasn't come without its own abundance of negative fan reception. Initially, people were afraid this Tawna was going to completely replace the original. What was that based on? Once again, her design. People now preferred the old Tawna, and they weren't really vibing with the pirate-esque look. But more than that, fans started complaining that she was too stereotypical, because even though this was a drastic change for the character, she was by far not the first to get this kind of treatment. I use Lois and April as previous examples, but starting around approximately the early 2010s, many other female characters were getting big design and role changes, and plenty of shows were popping up with female characters as the leads. I'm not going to stay on this topic for too long, because I'm honestly not very knowledgeable on it, but it seems this was happening not just for diversity, but to be more inclusive and give female characters stronger roles and more prominence, as plenty of feminist movements were occurring around this decade. I'm not saying that all the devs and showrunners chose to do this because of that, but with so many female characters undergoing this type of role and design, Tawna's step into that pool was retroactively looked at as uninspired and cliched. Some would even say forced. But even worse, people were taking particular note of specific design choices and using that to call Tawna's new design things like woke and edgy, negatively labeling her as a lesbian and using really hurtful and unnecessary language. It's more noticeable in the Crash series that most female characters were getting big changes, because as I stated in Coco's analysis, many of her qualities that were seen as, quote, stereotypically female-oriented were replaced with those that were more nerdy. And going back to the trophy girls, they looked much more promiscuous in the original CTR. Liz even had a really short skirt that led to a few panty shots in some promotional images. But in Nitrofield, out is their role of bodacious prize presenter, and in are the individual, more empowering qualities for each of them. Isabella's more into the mechanical intricacies of the carts, Ami's the strong one, constantly flexing and showing off her tough attitude, Liz loves being in the spotlight, and Megumi is very excitable. She's a general good sport and loves supporting those she respects and cares for, even if she loses. So Tawna wasn't the only one in the series this happened to, but being so prominent in Crash 4, everyone took notice. So whether or not the dynamic shift in female characters actually had something to do with influencing Tawna's change is up in the air, and honestly not the main thing worth discussing. It's just something I found interesting. If you own and look in the Crash 4 art book, you'll get your definitive reason as to why this overhaul occurred. Reading straight from the book, one of the game's writers, Mandy Beninoff, says, quote, "It made a lot of sense to make an alternate dimension Tawna who's led this whole different life. One of the things that was fun about that was we got to envision a Tawna who's basically the Crash of her universe. She has a history with one of our villains, and a lot of our story choices came from figuring out what we wanted to do with Tawna. In my eyes, she's sort of the main character, even though she's not the main playable character. Looking at the concepts for this Tawna feels eerily similar to looking at the ones for the original Tawna. You can see that evolution, the artists filling out how the character should look by going to some extremes. One of them makes her look much more motherly with a Potoru baby, actually leaning into the Japanese pinstripe story, and then bringing it back down and taking the best bits and unifying those. Concept artist Nico Saviori's entry about Tawna says, quote, "Since the early phase of the production, we decided to go another way with this character. She looks like an explorer. She looks like a very strong and powerful girl. She represents girl power. She is my favorite character in the whole game." And again, looking back at all these different designs, you can feel that passion. So there you go. Tawna's evolution is insanely interesting. Built off stereotypes, both iterations drenched in controversy, but despite it all, she pulled through. After Crash 4, this version of Tawna showed up again in Crash Team Rumble, and that's where we sit with the character at the moment. But now the question remains, what about the original Tawna? Alt Tawna does get a retro-themed skin in Rumble that gives her back her OG look, but as I said before, fans are starting to get worried that this Tawna will fully replace the original. She ironically returns to a brief cameo appearance in Crash 4, with her face showing up on a pillow in Rude Awakening's bonus round, but can we actually see her return in the Toys for Bob era games? My answer? I'm not sure. Beanox gave OG Tawna these empowering features and new tough girl attitude, and Toys for Bob used that as a basis for their version of the character. It'd be kind of redundant to have two versions of Rough and Tough Tawna, so the OG would probably have to be overhauled again. Do I as a fan want a definitive in-universe explanation as to why she left the group? Of course. Can they actually use OG Tawna as an outlet to canonize her relationship with Pinstripe and take her character in a different direction? I'd say that's a possibility. I mentioned during the Skylanders talk that Crash and Tawna's relationship would be reworked, and it was. The two are no longer together, and Crash and Alt Tawna are just friends. Is there more that can be explored with both iterations? I absolutely think so, but that's not really up to us. With the cancellation of Crash 5, I have no idea where the story is going to go from here. Knowing now that one huge theme of that game was going to be peering into villains' minds Psychonaut style, that could have been a cool way to dive into Alt Tawna's backstory through Entropy, and actually show us what went down. But I digress. I'm just glad Tawna's been given a second chance. From bombshell to badass, damsel to hero, she's proven she can take on whatever role the situation calls of her. And despite the conversations it may bring up, she's always been a strong enough character to withstand it all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, I've got more you can check out. And if you want to stay up to date on videos and streams, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, I'm Mark, and take care.